Most people think healing means forgetting, moving on, pushing pain into the past like it never mattered. But what if that's the exact reason you still feel broken? What if your wound isn't something to erase, but something to understand? Carl Jung believed that where you hurt the most is exactly where your soul is trying to wake up. That pain in your chest? That silence you carry? That old scar you don't talk about anymore? They're not proof of weakness. They're sacred invitations. In a world obsessed with fixing, hiding, numbing, Jung's view was radically different. He didn't believe you needed to be happy all the time. He believed you needed to become whole. And sometimes, becoming whole means walking directly into the places that scare you. Because here's the hard truth no one tells you. The very thing you've been running from might be the key to your deepest transformation. The light doesn't avoid the wound, it enters through it. This video is not about cliches. It's not about bypassing pain with pretty words. It's about meeting your story with depth. It's about discovering why your suffering keeps repeating, why certain emotions never leave, and how, through the lens of Jungian psychology, your broken pieces might actually be your map toward healing. If you've ever felt stuck, tired of pretending, or haunted by something you can't explain, this is for you. Most people spend their lives running away from pain. They treat it like a mistake, a punishment, or something to silence as quickly as possible. But Carl Jung saw pain through a different lens. He believed pain wasn't there to harm you. It was there to wake you up. Pain is not random. It's directional. It shows up exactly where your unconscious wants your attention. That aching, heaviness in your chest, that sharp sting from rejection, that recurring anxiety that seems to come out of nowhere, all of them are messengers. Jung considered them sacred signals from the unconscious, trying to bring your awareness to a part of you that's been abandoned, forgotten, or misunderstood. And what's remarkable is that most transformations, the real ones, begin exactly here, in the place where it hurts the most. The problem is, modern life teaches us to numb instead of listen. We medicate emotions, we binge distractions, we spiritualize avoidance, all in the name of staying positive. But ignoring pain doesn't erase it. It just buries it deeper into the unconscious, where it becomes more powerful, more destructive, and more subtle. Jung taught that the unconscious isn't passive, it's alive. And if you don't listen to it when it whispers, it will scream. This is why your suffering often repeats in cycles, in relationships, in decisions, in your own self-worth, until one day you're forced to ask, what is this pain trying to tell me? That question alone, if asked sincerely, can begin the most important journey of your life, the journey inward. What Jung discovered, and what few people are taught, is that emotional pain is often a doorway to self-integration. That panic attack? It might not be your enemy. It might be the first time your body refuses to live out of alignment with your soul. That heartbreak, maybe it wasn't meant to destroy you, but to reveal parts of yourself you were never allowed to meet before. The wound is where the light enters, not because suffering is noble, but because pain reveals what was previously hidden. It's the flashlight that illuminates the unconscious. And when we turn toward it, instead of away, we begin to see ourselves, truly, maybe for the first time. There's a powerful shift that happens when a person stops asking, how do I get rid of this pain? And starts asking, what is this pain pointing to? Because every recurring fear, every irrational thought, every self-sabotaging pattern, they are not random flaws. They are coded messages. They are symptoms of a deeper psychic split. Jung would call this fragmentation, when parts of your true self have been pushed away, exiled into the unconscious, and pain is the compass that leads you back to those lost parts. Awareness begins the moment you stop fighting your experience and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. And what it teaches is rarely easy, but it is always real. So, what happens next? Once you've recognized that your pain is a message, not a mistake, what do you do with that information? Where do you go from here? Because awareness is only the beginning. The next step is what Jung believed to be the heart of transformation, confronting what you've buried. And often, that means facing the parts of yourself you've spent your whole life avoiding, the shadow, the repressed, the uncomfortable truths. That's where we're headed next. There's a strange paradox about human nature. The more we try to hide something, the more power it gains over us. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the collection of traits, memories, impulses, and truths that we reject about ourselves. But here's the twist. What we suppress doesn't disappear. It waits, it watches, and it leaks out in the most unexpected ways. Ever overreacted to something minor? Ever sabotaged something good without knowing why? That's shadow material, in action. The wounded shadow isn't just a concept. It's a living force within your psyche. And until it's acknowledged, it quietly shapes your life, your choices, your relationships, even your spiritual path. It's easy to spot other people's shadows. The controlling boss, the overly critical parent, the friend who's always the victim. But looking at our own, that takes courage. It takes radical honesty. Because the shadow isn't made of evil, it's made of the rejected. The child who was told, "Don't cry," and now can't express vulnerability. The teen who was mocked for speaking up, and now stays silent in every room. These wounds fester in silence, and they shape our identity without consent. Jung believed that true healing begins when we turn toward the shadow, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because until we do, it will continue to run our lives from the dark. One of the reasons the shadow gains so much influence is because we avoid discomfort. Think about it. We're wired for survival, not truth. So we create masks. We tell ourselves stories. We say things like, "That's just the way I am," or "I'm fine, I've moved on." But underneath the surface, the repressed material still breathes. That sudden anger, that panic before intimacy, that constant need for validation. These are all ways the shadow calls out, asking to be seen. And the more we deny it, the more chaotic it becomes. Shadow work isn't glamorous. It's not Instagram quotes and perfect journaling sessions. It's messy, it's confronting, and it's liberating if you're brave enough to stay in the fire. Here's the liberating truth Jung offered. What we bring into consciousness, we gain power over, and what stays unconscious gains power over us. This is why healing doesn't start with light. It starts with darkness, with dissent, with being willing to sit with the uncomfortable parts of your story. Jung often said that the shadow is 90% pure gold, meaning that within our wounds lies our greatest potential, but we have to dig through the mud to find it. You want confidence? Start with the parts of you that feel unworthy. You want inner peace? Go to the places that are still at war inside you. That's where the breakthrough lives. So if the shadow holds both our pain and our potential, what happens when we finally bring light into it? What shifts inside a person who faces their darkest patterns and sees the truth without judgment? That's where the transformation truly begins. And it leads us directly into the next stage, where the light starts to emerge, not in spite of the wound, but because of it. If you've ever asked yourself, "Why did this have to happen to me?" you're not alone. It's one of the most human questions we ask when we're in pain, but Jung's perspective flips that question on its head. He would say, what is trying to emerge through this wound? The idea isn't just poetic, it's psychological. The wound itself is not the end. It's the opening, the rupture that breaks our false identity and lets something real flow in. That breakdown you had, the heartbreak, the illness, the betrayal. Those might be the exact cracks where the light begins to enter your life. Not because pain is romantic, but because it breaks the illusion. It interrupts the ego. It forces an awakening that comfort never could. Think about the moments in life that changed you the most. Were they during times of ease or struggle? The loss that made you question everything, the rejection that forced you to stand on your own, the diagnosis that taught you what truly matters. These aren't just random misfortunes. They're initiations. The wound, when faced consciously, becomes a rite of passage. It strips away what is false and reveals the truth underneath. That's what Jung meant by the light. It's not just hope, it's clarity, insight, a deep inner knowing that only suffering can unlock. And no, that doesn't make the pain easier, but it gives it meaning. And meaning is what transforms suffering into healing. There's a reason why every spiritual tradition, every myth, and every hero's journey includes a fall before the rise. Jesus had the cross. Buddha had the suffering of the world. Even in modern stories, from Frodo in Lord of the Rings to Moana leaving her island, the light comes after the descent. Jung called this the journey through the unconscious. And in your life, that descent might look like therapy, like grief, like sitting alone in silence, asking hard questions. It might mean facing your fears head-on, or revisiting wounds you tried to forget. But what waits on the other side is not just survival, it's integration, wholeness, a version of yourself you've never met before. Now here's the part that many people miss. The light doesn't erase the wound, it shines through it. Healing, in Jungian terms, is not about becoming unbroken. It's about seeing that your brokenness is part of the design. It's what gives you empathy, depth, wisdom. It's what allows you to sit with others in their pain without needing to fix or flee. When you stop resisting your wound and start respecting it as a teacher, everything changes. Your perspective shifts. Your relationships deepen. Your spiritual life expands. That pain you thought would destroy you becomes the place where your soul starts to speak, loudly, clearly, with power. But the wound isn't just personal. Sometimes it points to a collective fracture, a generational trauma, a cultural lie, an inherited belief system that no longer serves. And when the light starts to shine through those deeper cracks, it doesn't just transform you. It begins to transform your entire lineage. Your story becomes sacred ground. And this sacred ground is exactly where the next phase of healing begins. The process of inner initiation, where suffering becomes wisdom. In every ancient culture, initiation meant death and rebirth. Not always physical death, but symbolic. The shedding of an old identity to step into a new one. Jung understood that the wound is not just a psychological burden. It is an initiation, a passage into deeper consciousness. And like any true initiation, it hurts, it confuses, it strips away certainty, but only because something larger is trying to emerge. You're not just healing, you're transforming. And transformation doesn't ask for permission. It shows up uninvited, as loss, as shame, as failure. And it demands that you surrender who you were to meet who you're meant to become. That's the function of the wound in depth psychology. It marks the moment where the real journey begins. In tribal traditions, the initiate is taken out of their ordinary world, isolated, challenged, sometimes even scarred. The pain marks them, not as punishment, but as proof that they've crossed a threshold. The wound becomes a badge, a sacred sign that they've seen the other side. And here's what's wild. This isn't just mythology. We see it in everyday people who've faced deep depression, addiction, grief, and emerged with a different kind of presence, a quiet strength, an unshakable clarity. That's initiation. And chances are, if you're reading this, life has already begun initiating you. The question is, are you resisting it, or are you leaning into it with eyes open? Modern life tries to sell us the opposite. It glorifies ease. It avoids depth. It tells you that if you're hurting, something's wrong. Take a pill, scroll more, smile anyway. But initiations were never meant to be convenient. They're meant to change your relationship with yourself. They force you to confront illusions, release attachments, and find your inner authority. Jung believed that initiation was essential for psychological maturity. That without going through this sacred fire, we remain fragmented, stuck in roles, personas, and fears that don't belong to us. The wound then becomes the crack through which your adult self is born, not chronologically, but emotionally, spiritually, existentially. The power of inner initiation is that it doesn't give you answers, it makes you ready for them. After walking through the darkness, the same old patterns no longer satisfy. The shallow praise, the fake smiles, the temporary highs, they lose their grip. You start craving something real, something whole. The wound makes you question everything you once took for granted, your beliefs, your boundaries, your worth. And through that questioning, a more authentic self begins to take form. You start responding instead of reacting. You start choosing with intention. You start living with meaning, not because it was handed to you, but because you earned it, drop by drop, through your pain. But initiation is not the final stage. It's not the mountaintop. It's the turning point. It prepares you for the real work, the long, slow, often invisible process of integration. That's where the healing becomes lasting, where the insights become habits, where the wound doesn't just open, it becomes part of your architecture. And that's where we're going next. Let's get something straight. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel pain again. That's one of the biggest myths in self-help and spiritual circles. The idea that healing is about reaching some magical state where nothing bothers you anymore. But Jung saw healing differently. To him, healing meant becoming whole, not becoming numb. Real healing doesn't erase your pain. It reshapes your relationship with it. You stop being owned by it. You stop identifying with the wound. And in that space, something powerful happens. Your story shifts from one of survival to one of transformation. You're no longer just a victim of what happened to you. You become an alchemist, turning pain into power, confusion into clarity. There's a quiet strength that comes from owning your story, not romanticizing it, not pretending it didn't hurt, but standing in it fully. Jung believed that healing happens when we integrate, not avoid. When we take the parts of ourselves that were once exiled and bring them into dialogue with the whole. That might look like writing about your experiences. It might look like setting boundaries with someone who never saw your worth. It might even look like crying in your car, finally letting yourself feel what you buried for decades. This isn't weakness. It's emotional maturity. It's the difference between pretending you're okay and actually becoming okay. One of Jung's most profound insights was this: symptoms are symbols. That recurring anxiety, that deep loneliness, that unexplainable fatigue, these aren't just problems to fix. They're messages to decode. They point toward what is fragmented. And healing is about integration, the slow, courageous act of reconnecting what's been disconnected. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. If you're trying to build a peaceful life on top of unhealed pain, it'll always collapse. Real peace comes from facing the thing beneath the surface and choosing to work with it, not against it. That's transformation. And it's a process, not a destination. You might never get over certain things, but you can grow around them, like a tree that bends but doesn't break, like scar tissue that becomes stronger than the skin around it. Jung believed that the person who has faced their darkness becomes a light for others, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. They've been through the storm and returned with a deeper compassion, a softer presence, a sharper intuition. And this is the kind of healing the world is starving for. Not perfection, but authenticity. Not denial, but integration. When you realize that your pain doesn't make you broken, it makes you human, everything starts to shift. So now that you know healing isn't about erasing the wound but embracing it, what's next? Where does all this inner work lead? Jung had an answer, and it wasn't just psychological, it was deeply spiritual. The wound, he believed, was not only a portal to consciousness, but a sacred doorway to the soul itself. You've just walked through a doorway that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You've looked into the wound not to pity it, but to understand its message. And now the question is yours to answer. What are you going to do with this light? Will you push it aside and return to the numbness? Or will you let it guide you deeper into who you really are? Because the truth is, the wound never disappears, but it does evolve. It stops bleeding and starts speaking. And when you're brave enough to listen, it will reveal parts of you that no textbook or therapy session ever could. So here's your invitation. Don't just learn about healing, live it. Start by asking yourself tonight, in stillness, what is my pain trying to teach me? Maybe it's time to stop running, to stop pretending, to stop believing the lie that your brokenness makes you less. Because what if, just what if, your most painful experience was also your most sacred one? Let me know in the comments. What's the wound you've been carrying? And what light has begun to shine through it? I'd love to read your story, or even just your silence, if that's all you can offer today. And if this spoke to something deep in you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and stay with us. Because this journey into the self, it's only just beginning.